I just envision this future where naturopathic doctors like Desiree will be able to meet a new client and have one of the assessment tools or intake processes be, here's your ACE questionnaire, your Adverse Childhood Events questionnaire. Fill that out. And if your score is really 1 or higher, you have some trauma in your past, starting with that before we get into, for sure, offering pharmaceuticals or making big diet changes or lifestyle changes, because we know that we are a society that has not done a good job of dealing with our emotional health. Welcome to the Eversio Experience podcast. I'm Brandi Garden, the co-founder of Eversio Wellness, and I'm here with my co-host, Desiree Caruso, who has a background in naturopathic medicine.
We're here to talk all about the world of mushroom wellness because mushrooms are critical to the maintenance of our physical well-being and our collective mental health.
We believe mushrooms are symbols of interconnectedness, and we're so excited to connect you with the health, wellness, and wisdom that they have brought us on our journey to this moment.
Our ancestors had deep cultural connections to mushrooms, but today they remain understudied, undervalued, and often misunderstood by much of modern society.
So we are here to change that. Eversio means change, and it's our mission to change lives through fungi.
There is a mushroom for every moment.
And we're so glad you're here to share this moment with us.
Welcome back to the show. If you haven't already checked out episode 1 of the Eversio Experience, you are going to want to go back and hear that. It is where we introduce ourselves and we explain how we got here to Eversio Wellness and all of the synchronicities that led us to this moment.
Yes, but in this episode, we are talking all about one of my favorite things, brains. Brain health, neurogenesis, cognitive function. We'll probably slide in a bit of meditation. And of course, mushrooms. So let's start with the basics to make sure that we are all on the same page when it comes to this most complex part of the human body, this computer that we're all carrying around on our shoulders all of the time. So most important to me when I think about brains is that the brain is this seat of intelligence. It's thinking and it's understanding and it's creating. And these are things we all appreciate having, and we all want to have them and maintain them as we age. And at 47 years old, I'm definitely thinking about my thinking, that metacognition piece, more and more often. And as we see people my age, our parents hitting that age where the fear of dementia and Alzheimer's starts to hit, I think we can't not think about thinking anymore, people. So this is why today's about brains. Physically, the brain is the initiator of body movement and the controller of our behavior. So we literally aren't going anywhere or doing anything without it, and that alone makes it worth learning about. It's kind of a big deal. Every time we take a step or we smile, we are literally seeing our brain physically in action. What we can't physically see is that the brain is also the interpreter of our senses. So it's how we experience this three-dimensional world around us. Everything we see, everything we smell, everything we hear, we taste, we feel, the only reason that we are able to make sense of those things is because the brain is receiving all of that information from this world and processing it through. So when I started to learn about neuroscience, for me, it was in hopes of discovering a way to heal my own brain after a seizure that I had. And I was just fascinated by the role of the neuron. The neuron. And if you go Google it right now, and you're going to see this picture of this neuron, and you think it's like this tree, it's this big thing. And as I learned more about it, and it's how it's part of the physical structure of our brain, and that they're not just in our brain, it turns out they're all throughout our body. Essentially, I just had this knowing that I really wanted to take care of the neurons that I had. And I wanted more of them. I wanted to grow more of them. And this was new because as an elementary school teacher, I was the teacher telling kids to wear a bike helmet if you are riding your bike home from school today. Because if you should fall and bonk your head, you're going to kill brain cells and you'll never get them back. This was literally the story I told my students just 15, 20 years ago. This is what we thought. If you kill brain cells, that's it. You can't get more. And today, we know in neuroscience that is 100% not true. Neurogenesis is available to us. We can grow more neurons, and I wanted lots of them. So really, I just wanted to grow more so that I would be able to have a health span that would last my lifespan. Taking care of our physical body with exercise and the way we eat is so important so that we can have longevity. But to me, I knew none of that's going to matter if the computer up here isn't along for the ride. So as I read more and more research on neurogenesis, which is the process of forming new neurons in the brain throughout our lifespan, I became really interested in the importance of nerve growth factor, NGF, comes up all the time. We read about it every day. Des is smiling because it shows up in all the research when we're reading about mushrooms, which we'll get to. So let's get super nerdy. Neurons are nerdy, and talk about neurons and nerve growth factor. So a neuron is just a nerve cell. It's a brain cell, and it is the simplest functional unit of the nervous system. So we have a sympathetic nervous system that carries signals that put our body into alert. So this is the fight or flight system. And we have a parasympathetic nervous system that carries signals that relax the body's systems. This is the rest and digest. I'm trying to think of where I am right now. Where are you right now? Are you sympathetic or parasympathetic? Are we resting and digesting? Or are we
I think it can be a mix of both, right? It depends on where you're at in the day, and sometimes naturally certain stressors, so to speak, right, kind of activate that sympathetic nervous system, and then, you know, once you get talking and once you get your footing, then you kind of drop in and you get more relaxed and things like that. The body just sometimes picks it up as a stressor.
Yeah, I'm feeling your vibe, and I'm feeling like you're in rest and digest.
Yeah, I'm chilling.
It's a nice place to be. It's a nice place to be. We all want to try to get there more. But really, in order to feel our best, to be in health, we need the two systems to work together for our body to feel in balance. And I think that what we're seeing, being in this space, is that in general, as a humanity, we're not in balance enough of the time. We live in states of chronic stress. We're in that fight or flight far too often, too much time spent in sympathetic nervous system, and that's just making us sick as a society. Being in that state too long gives us this pathway to mental illness. It leads to chronic disease. In my case, I know that it was part of what led to autoimmune disease for me. So how can knowing about neurons get us out of that mess of being in this chronic state of stress all of the time? So neurons have this really unique ability to store information and then to communicate that information that they have stored with each other, with other neurons. And we need a lot of them in order to keep the nervous system functioning effectively and efficiently. So it's literally what builds up that system so it can be strong and it can work well to keep us well. So I love analogies. And the best analogy I have for a neuron is that itself, the little neuron, is like a computer. So responsible for processing incoming information, sometimes from hundreds of sources all at the same time. And then neurons send electrical signals down their axon, and that's the message that can be communicated to other cells in the body. So if you want to imagine what they look like, if you're watching this, neurons are like trees, and they have these dendrites that are like the branches of the tree. And then there's the soma is like the trunk of the tree. And then that axon is like the root. So having this idea that it actually, like nature, if we flip it upside down, we could have the mushroom. We could have the mycelium of the mushroom and the stem of the mushroom and the fruiting body of the mushroom as well. So much in nature is what it looks like inside of us. We have a lot of them. We have, some researchers now are saying we have about 100 billion neurons in the human brain. I remember learning about it at the beginning, and the research I was reading was saying like 86 billion neurons. So don't quote me on the number, but it's about 100 billion neurons in the human brain. So we obviously need a lot of them in order to be human. And when I started thinking about, how can I convince people that these neurons are important? It made me think, well, they're connected to intelligence, and that's important to people. We all want to feel like we can know things and we can do the things we want to do. And what are creatures on this planet that might not have the intelligence that we do? And how can we relate that to the number of neurons they have? So let's talk about the next most intelligent beings. And we look at chimpanzees, always in research, and we have about 15 times more neurons in our brains than chimpanzees do in their brains. So chimpanzees today, we think they have about 6 billion neurons in their brain. But I love dogs. And Desiree loves dogs. We have a new puppy at home, and trying to train her makes me realize she's intelligent, but she's not as smart as we are. And sometimes I think, how could they be so silly? And yes, we have 200 times more neurons in our brains than dogs have in their brains. They have about 500 million neurons in their brains. So there's no doubt that we see in nature that the number of neurons we have can be connected to our intelligence. So there's this talk right now in the wellness space often about the second brain as well. We talk about gut health, and we talk about the fact that we also have neurons in the gut, and that kind of makes it another brain, and this couldn't be more true. We have the vagus nerve traveling from the brain to the gut as this super highway of information traveling back and forth, and it's literally the neurons in both places that are communicating and connecting with each other. So I always we talk about like getting the feeling of butterflies before filming a podcast. You get kind of those butterflies, or we get that stress before a presentation or before a big event. We have stomach ulcers happening because we feel stressed. I have a few friends that are emotional eaters, filling the gut when something up here is making them feel stressed or emotional, or even just that feeling that we call a gut feeling, our intuition. All of these provide clues that the brain and the gut are actually talking to each other all of the time. So when I looked into research, researchers at UBC, here where we live, published that the mass of neural tissue in our gut produces over 30 different neurotransmitters, including, this was astonishing, 95% of the production and storage of serotonin. Serotonin, the neurotransmitter, famously known as the happy chemical, because it helps us with regulating our mood and well-being. So when we are talking about the brain today, we're going to talk about nerve growth factor, and we're going to talk about neurons. We're talking about the brain, but we're not always just talking about this brain. We're also talking about that second brain. So gut health affects the brain, and brain health affects the gut. So back to the brain, connection is so important. The neurons in our thinking brain are called neocortical neurons, and they have more than 10,000 connections on them each. And it makes me think, how do we have that much space? How do we have that much space if we've got 100 billion of these things and they each have 10,000 connections on them? How are our heads not so much bigger? And then you look into the size of an actual neuron, and it's not the size of what you just saw when you Googled what a neuron looks like. If you took a scoop of gray matter out of the brain, the size of a grain of sand, there'd be about 100,000 neurons in it. And in those 100,000 neurons in that grain of sand, there would be 1 billion connections available in a grain of sand. So you can imagine how dense this is inside of us. These neurons communicate in all different directions, so they're three-dimensional, reaching out all over the place, just like a tree reaches out. And this is the function of your brain. That's it. That's it. This is how your brain functions. Every place where one neuron connects with another neuron, they're exchanging information all the time. And this is my love. This is learning. So I just remember those days of looking out in the classroom and being witness of the aha moment. You know, that student that was struggling with whatever it was, long division. Couldn't get it. And then bing, and it's like we see the light bulb go on in all these cartoons and comics, and that's the moment. You're literally witnessing learning happen when two neurons have this connection to each other and create literally new matter in the brain. So this synaptic connection is learning, and every time you learn something new, there is a physical change in your brain. We can see it. We can see it happening on functional MRIs. We see it in all of the neuroscience research showing up. And then we have to maintain that. We learn something new, and sometimes we forget it. And it's so important that we work as adults on not forgetting what we've learned, remembering that maintaining and sustaining those connections is what's going to keep us having this intelligence as we age. So just like relationships, the more we communicate, the more bonded we become.
Use it or lose it.
Use it or lose it. So neurons, they want to develop long-term relationships, just like we do as human beings. And this happens through repetition. So if you keep firing and wiring, I just came back from a Joe Dispenza retreat on neuroscience and meditation, and the amount of times we heard firing and wiring, neurons that fire together, wire together. And the more that we do that, we know that they will eventually seal together and that we will have this learning, we will have these memories for a long, long time. So there's two ways to make synaptic connections in our brains. We have semantic memories. So this is learning information, the theory, the knowledge, the philosophy. This is you and I nerding out, reading all the research all of the time. And then we have these episodic memories. And this comes when we have novel experiences, when we go out in the world and have new events happen in our life. So important. So the book smarts isn't everything. We have to go out and experience this 3D world around us with our senses also in order to create these connections in our brain. So nerve cells that fire together, wire together, and then nerve growth factor comes along and acts like the miracle grow or the chemical glue that makes those new synaptic connections stick, to become more enhanced, and to flourish over time. So nerve growth factor is a neurotrophic factor that can promote the growth, development, differentiation, and maturation of central and peripheral neurons. So it maintains the normal function of the nervous system, and it accelerates the repair of the nervous system after injury. So nerve growth factor is really important for our neurons to stay healthy. And we can make our own. We can make our own nerve growth factor just by learning new things and doing new things, having these experiences. But there's also ways that we can help out the brain by stimulating the production of nerve growth factor so that these neurons can grow and develop in our lives. So Desiree is going to tell us about the mushrooms that can support this development of nerve growth factor that we rely on so much, because I think that was the first thing in the research that really hit us was people talk about how they feel when they consume mushrooms, but we always want to know why are they feeling that. And I think nerve growth factor was it was definitely the gateway conversation for me. So Des, tell us about mushrooms and nerve growth factor and why that's important.
So a lot of the research on nerve growth factor is examining how nerve growth factor is stimulating the production of new neurons, the growth of new neurons, also known as neurogenesis, in particular areas of the brain that is beneficial for learning and memory. So for example, researchers are examining nerve growth factor in the hippocampal areas of the brain. So the hippocampus in our brain is responsible for learning and memory. Other areas such as the cerebral cortex, which is kind of like our higher thinking brain for complex tasks, problem solving, as well as emotions and things like that. And then as well as the cerebellum. So a lot of the research on lion's mane is in that area, is how it can improve the production or the neurogenesis in those particular areas. Because as we age, our ability to form or preserve neuronal connections naturally declines. And I mentioned earlier, right, like use it or lose it. And that, sometimes as we get older, we may have a decline in memory and so forth. So a lot of the research on lion's mane and brain health is surrounding nerve growth factor. But, so we talked about, Brandi mentioned, where it can help with cognition, it can help with learning, it can help with memory, but it can also help in many other ways too. For example, supporting mood. So earlier, Brandi mentioned with gut health in particular, we know that all of the systems in our body are connected somehow. It's not just solely brain health and brain function that we are looking to improve. It's also gut health. What's the relationship between that? So, if you think of somebody who has maybe had a concussion or has been in a car accident or, has had some sort of head trauma, maybe they fell as they're older, etc. There is research to suggest that after a head injury, there is an increase in inflammation in the gut tissue. And we know that there is a gut-brain axis. And so that inflammation could potentially go up into our brain. And in addition, there are changes in blood sugar levels as well. So improving brain health and supporting our brain is not just solely cookie cutter only focusing on the brain. It's a wide variety of other factors that are helping. So it's fascinating to read the research on lion's mane and nerve growth factor. So here's one, for example. A double-blind trial was conducted, and there were about 50 to 80-year-old Japanese men and women who were diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment. And in order to examine the efficacy of oral administration of lion's mane, for improving cognitive impairment, they used a cognitive function scale based on the revised Hasegawa dimension scale. So these are essentially scales. There are many of them that they will fill out. So the subjects in the lion's mane group took 4 250 milligram tablets that were containing 96% of lion's mane dry powder 3 times a day for 16 weeks. So let's break that down because that dosing is extremely important.
Extremely important.
Extremely important. So 250 milligram tablets, but there were 4 of them. So 250 milligrams times 4, that's 1,000 milligrams 3 times per day. So 3,000 milligrams per day of lion's mane powder, lion's mane extract powder.
I love that study. It was the game changer for me. It's like, whoa.
But
That's a lot.
But that is a lot. And this is the thing is that, we could quickly just look at the study and think, oh, it was 250 milligrams. Great. That's how much I need to take. That is just like a grain of sand compared to the dose that we actually need to take to enact change. So that is a big thing. And we touched on that in episode 1 about dosing and pixie dusting. So paying attention to the exact dose is extremely important. Research is typically examining doses of minimum 2,000 milligrams per day, but it's usually around 3,000 milligrams per day. So for 16 weeks. So that's 4 months, right? So a lot of the research on functional mushrooms, and especially examining things on like a physiological level or things like cognitive function, something that takes potentially decades to get you to that point. Think of chronic illness, chronic disease, chronic symptoms. Those don't just appear in a week. Sometimes it can happen, but generally speaking, it's going to be a longer period of time. And so the research is examining longer periods of time. And so after these 16 weeks, the cognitive function scale scores increased with the duration of the intake. So as the study went along, these scores, these cognitive function tests, they actually did better while they were supplementing with lion's mane. So the laboratory test showed no adverse effects of lion's mane, which is awesome. And the study suggested that lion's mane is effective in improving mild cognitive impairment. So the extracts of lion's mane induced phosphorylation of C-Jun and terminal kinase, also known as JNK, so you can look that up, and its downstream substrate C-Jun, and increased C-Phos expression, suggesting that lion's mane promotes nerve growth factor gene expression via JNK signaling. So that might sound really sciencey. Essentially what that means...
Did we mention she's a naturopathic doctor?
So what that means is that lion's mane extract is enhancing particular biochemical pathways in the brain that is supportive of regrowing new neurons and new neural tissue. So this is extremely important. And I mentioned earlier, use it or lose it, right? It's just like a certain skill. If you continuously and repetitiously do something, then you are going to maintain that skill, right? There's no reason why people who have a higher level of education typically have lower levels of dementia or Alzheimer's. Not only that, but typically these people are ones who are continuously learning as they go along. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a level of education. But as you are aging, you are continuously learning and challenging your brain in new ways. That's why, you see older individuals and they're continuously doing crosswords and things like that, little brain games, because you're using your brain to continue its function. So lion's mane stimulates neurotrophic factors, including nerve growth factor, as well as brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. And herichinone C, one of the major metabolites in the fruiting bodies of lion's mane, is known for its significant role in the production of nerve growth factors in brain astrocytes. So I mentioned herichinone C. It's something that Brandi and I talk about quite frequently if you follow on the social media page on Eversio. And so this is extremely important. So hericinones are found in the fruiting body of lion's mane. The fruiting body is the actual mushroom part of the mushroom, like what you see in the grocery store, but for lion's mane in particular. Haricinones will only be present if the lion's mane mushroom supplement is a dual extract. So as a refresher, all of our functional mushrooms are extracts because when it goes through that extraction process, you are concentrating all of those medicinal compounds from the fruiting body so that we can have a bioavailable and concentrated dose, so that we can get a dose that is as close to, if not at that dose of 3,000 milligrams or higher, just like I mentioned earlier in the study.
So what would be in one of our capsules of lion's mane?
So one capsule of our 8-to-1 dual extract of lion's mane is 4,000 milligrams quantity crude equivalent. So just with one capsule, you're getting more than that dose that the researchers were examining for 16 weeks.
It's like we thought about that when we formulated the product.
So here's the thing is that there are many products, right, that are extracts. That is awesome. They need to be an extract if you are consuming functional mushrooms. But in particular with lion's mane, and we will touch on the other functional mushrooms that also need to be a dual extract. Dual extract meaning it goes through two extraction processes. The first is hot water extraction. All of our products are hot water extracts. Then it goes through a second extraction process with alcohol because certain molecules such as haricinones are alcohol soluble, essentially meaning that alcohol attracts it out there so that we can put it in our products. So that is extremely important for the haricinones to be present because if you're taking lion's mane for the particular health benefits, that we mentioned in this study, and there are many other studies as well that we won't have time to touch on, if you're not getting a dual extract, you're less likely to be getting those physiological benefits. So that's extremely important with dosing as well as having a dual extract. So lion's mane contains essential health-promoting substances, particularly terpenoids, like haricinones and erinacine. So I mentioned haricinones. That is a type, essentially that molecule, they are called terpenoids. And terpenoids are only present if it is an alcohol extraction. There are other terpenoids in other functional mushrooms that are specific to those functional mushrooms. So for example, with reishi. Reishi also contains terpenoids. That is also why our reishi is a dual extract, and Brandi will touch on that later as well. But the specific terpenoids from reishi that we want, ganoderic acid. Chaga is also a dual extract. We want the betulinic acid, which is a terpenoid because of its anti-inflammatory and other benefits, which we will touch on as well. But it's these terpenoids like haricinones that are important. Erinacines are also terpenoids, but those are found in the mycelium of lion's mane. And because we do not include any mycelium in our products, it's the haricinones that's the important piece. These compounds have a stimulating effect on the synthesis of nerve growth factor, which, as Brandi mentioned, is a protein of great importance for the proper functioning of the nervous system.
Miracle Grow.
Miracle Grow. So far, attention has been paid to terpenoids, assigning activity in the central nervous systems only to these compounds. So fruiting body, extremely important so that you can get those haricinones. Dual extraction, so that the haricinones are actually present in the product. That's extremely important. And, lion's mane, as you can tell, was Brandi and I's first love with functional mushrooms because we could talk about it forever because of our personal stories to brain health, right? Brandi being from her seizure and her health, from me just being as an athlete and seeing how so many people are affected, so many athletes are affected by concussions and also just Alzheimer's and preventing that, right? If you're not feeling like yourself and if your brain is not able to function at max capacity like you're normally able to, what's your quality of life, in my opinion, right? Yeah. So, Brandi, tell us the story. I know I kind of touched on it a little bit, but tell us the story about what you first learned about lion's mane that kind of really hooked you in to think, I need to do more research on this topic.
Yeah. So I won't bore you with my whole health story, but essentially the end of the poor health story of my life was with an MRI on my brain. So because I'd had a seizure, that was the neurologist's request to see what was going on. And when we got the results of that MRI, it was horrifying. One of the worst days of my life to read the actual diagnosis there. And I could have just really focused on that. Well, this is happening to me and I'm going to sit back and let it happen. But I'm not that type of a person. I was so determined to go the other way and say, I'm going to fix this. And if there are no answers in the medical system for me, I'm going to find them myself. And really, it's just neurogenesis. That's all I needed was to learn about neurogenesis, and I'm so grateful that that popped up for me when I started reading, and that then that lion's mane was connected to this idea of neurogenesis. So essentially, I saw my brain. There were definitely parts of my brain where the neurons were gone. There were just these sections of the brain that were dark on an MRI, and that was showing us that I was losing brain cells at a rate much faster than someone at my age. He actually said to me my brain looked like I was 80. I'd also had DNA testing done, and I knew that I carried the marker for Alzheimer's in my family, which does not mean I'm going to get it. It just means that with the right set of triggers and lifestyle factors, I could experience that later on, and I definitely don't want that. So I really decided at that moment to start taking care of my brain intentionally to do things that way. And I started learning about the neurogenic rate. And so our neurogenic rate is probably the most important factor for brain health, and it's how quickly we produce new neurons. So we're reading about how, yes, lion's mane can help us produce new neurons. You know, it was kind of a funny joke in our family that I was going to have early onset dementia or Alzheimer's, and how they would bug me and how that would work in our family. And I can laugh about it now. It wasn't super funny in the moment, but my brother-in-law and my sister actually, on a holiday together, handed me a magazine that was like Alzheimer's Weekly as this funny joke. And thanks, brother and sister, for that funny thing. But I actually read the magazine they gave me as a joke, and I remember reading about the weight of brains and how people who had passed due to Alzheimer's or dementia donated their brains to science, and they weighing the brains discovered some really cool stuff. And it connects to what you were saying. When we learn new things and we're actually building new brain tissue, that shows up as physical structural matter, and that weighs something. So if you want to be inspired to learn new things, the brains of the people who knew more than one language, who knew music. I'm peeking around at our producer, T, because she's a music producer, and music is so magical for our brains. We know that when people learn music, their brain grows and it weighs more than people who do not know how to read or play music.
That's cool.
So cool. So learning to speak another language, learning to play or read music, and the other one was racket sports. So we play a lot of ping pong here at Eversio HQ, and it's not by coincidence. It's because we know that we are literally growing our brains by doing those things, and that when we're gone one day, our brains will weigh as much as we could make them weigh, because we're actually increasing that matter. So essentially, at far younger than people probably start thinking about it, I was thinking about preventing Alzheimer's. So learning languages, reading music, playing ping pong and tennis and these things, but also starting to take lion's mane and knowing that I could stimulate this nerve growth factor came early on for me, and I'm grateful for that. So it used to be thought that our brains stopped growing in our early 20s, and then it was just this like one long, slow die-off to death. And I'm so grateful that now, just about 20 years ago, we know that it's not true. Like I said, the brain makes new cells throughout our entire lifetime, right until the day that we die. We're able to do that. That's called neurogenesis, or the genesis of new neurons. And like Desiree said, it's the hippocampus part of the brain that grows these new brain cells. And Alzheimer's attacks the hippocampus, stops people with Alzheimer's from being able to create those new memories. So when the rate at which we make new brain cells starts to slow down, that is when we start to see these symptoms: chronic stress, brain fog. I definitely was experiencing that. I don't know how many times I left my keys in the door. Oh my goodness. Dementia, cognitive decline, and it turns out that our diet has a lot to do with this. So we want a brain that is growing all of the time. We want a high neurogenic rate. That is our goal. That is my goal when I wake up every day. And then I think, well, what can I do and what can I not do if I want that neurogenic rate to stay high? And it turns out I had to ask the question, what did I do? How did my brain get to looking like that? So if you listened to episode 1, you know the long story of the fact that I took a pharmaceutical immunosuppressant drug for 13 years. And that may or may not be what led to me having that seizure. We don't know. But for sure, the neurologist I worked with said just stop taking it, because we don't know that pharmaceutical didn't have that side effect, because I was in the clinical trial for it. No one had been taking it as long as I had. So I did stop taking that. And when I looked at what other things might be doing it, even just a simple Wikipedia search will show you that there are over 6,000 neurotoxins that we know of in our environment. And that means they're probably ones we don't know of. And these were the three big things for me. I knew that if I wanted my next MRI to look better, I needed to avoid heavy metals. So heavy metals are in everything. They are neurotoxins. They are massively dangerous for our brains. And that means that when we decided we were going to produce a product that was going to help people's brains, we were going to be darn sure there weren't any heavy metals in it. And this is something, I think you just got a question yesterday from a customer about how do you know there's no lead in your mushrooms? Well, great question. And we do know that there's not lead in our mushrooms because we can test for heavy metals today. And if we can do it, all companies that produce things that you're going to put inside your body are able to test for heavy metals. Now, does that mean that they do? No.
No comment.
No comment. And I mean, I know just recently in the news, there's been lots of talk about cocoa and lots of people living on smoothies in the morning. We're one of those families, and the cocoa industry not testing for heavy metals, and cocoa being a source of heavy metals that we can't necessarily be aware of if we are not, as the consumer, being responsible for asking that company, did you test for heavy metals? So being aware that heavy metals are out there, and they can show up in our food, and the company that is creating your food should be looking for them and making you aware. So you can see our COAs, our certificates of analysis, right on our website, showing we test for the heavy metals and that we are far below what Health Canada requires for products to be considered supplements in our country. So heavy metals, neurotoxins, do your research, stay away from them as much as you can. Air quality is the other one. Didn't even think about it before this experience with my MRI, but the air that we are breathing can contain neurotoxins. Just by taking a breath, there can be particulates in the air that are damaging to the brain. Now, we're very lucky as we look outside. We have a beautiful window in front of us, and there's blue sky today. We live in British Columbia. We are in a temperate rainforest surrounded by so many trees that I feel pretty safe where we live, that our air quality is excellent, and so much gratitude for the place we live. Some of our listeners, some people live in areas that have smog. That's a neurotoxin. Being aware of that and knowing that you can prevent it by spending less time in the smoggy places or have air filtration systems when you're inside can be really important to you. Us as a company not contributing to air quality issues with the packaging that we are using to offer our product to a community is how we can contribute to better air quality. So we have a zero waste refill system where our product is coming in a glass jar with a metal lid that you keep forever, and then a home compostable refill pouch that you can use after was intentional because the plastics that are being created on our planet that are ending up in the oceans on our planet, or worse, in incinerators where they're being burnt and becoming the neurotoxins that are the reason people took the supplement that was in the plastic jar, was insanity to me. So air quality is important, and this means that climate change is important, and that means that sustainability is important. And then glyphosates. This is probably the worst. Glyphosates. And glyphosates are pesticides. These are the things that producers of food are spraying onto our food to make it last a long time and for them to be able to work with it and make their money. So glyphosates are the worst neurotransmitters on our planet today and most widely used pesticide in the history of the world in all time. So I was reading research yesterday, and it said that 92% of North Americans have measurable levels of glyphosates in their bloodstream. So if you're thinking, that's not me, it's you. Those 8, I'm like, who are the 8% of people who don't have it in their bloodstream? They're the people that eat 100% organic. It's the only way. It's the only way to stay away from them. So this makes it hugely important to eat organic food and take organic supplements whenever you can. Again, it's why we at Eversio Wellness are a USDA organic certified company. And we're not just saying that. You can look us up in the database, and everything that comes from us is organic certified, so that you don't ever have to worry about there being a glyphosate in your product.
Even the capsule.
Even the capsule's organic certified. That was a hard process, a long process, but so worth it. So heavy metals, air quality, glyphosates, or other pesticides, I knew I wanted to avoid those. We should all be thinking about avoiding neurotoxins in order to keep our brains from looking like mine did on that MRI. About glyphosates, not only are they antibiotic, because that's how they are making the food not go bad or not get sick. When we consume that antibiotic, it is wiping out our microbiome. And it is opening up the tight junctions in our intestines that are designed to keep the bad stuff out. So when we consume these things that are non-organic, it is giving us what we all know as leaky gut. And when I look back, and I've worked with naturopathic doctors, I very much think that the beginning of my autoimmune disease that caused me to take the pharmaceutical had probably a lot to do with a leaky gut due to the poor quality food that I was eating, along with everybody else in my neighborhood. Those mini wheats. Lots of that. So again, that gut-brain connection for sure had something to do with it. The blood-brain barrier responding to the same molecular signal as the junctions in our intestines. So leaky brain, essentially, leaky gut, same thing, letting these neurotoxins in. So important. I just thinking about our diet, eating organically as much as we can, thinking about the products that we're consuming and bringing into our home, thinking about sustainability of products and air quality, and really looking to companies to be the ones responsible for this, keeping the heavy metals out of our system is what I was led to know and to believe and to bring to this company. So,
With all of that, health is not just one area, right? Health is all encompassing. There are many different areas. If you are somebody who is looking to support your brain health, it's not just taking a supplement for your brain. Sure, if you were to take lion's mane to support your brain functioning, to mitigate that brain fog that you're experiencing, would it help? Yes, absolutely. However, that is not a replacement for all of the factors in your health and in your lifestyle. You cannot supplement your way out of a poor diet. It's kind of like that analogy of, that person who just has a horrible diet, eats a lot of sugar, eats a lot of fast food, and says, well, I'll just burn it off in the gym. Well, quality of food is extremely important. Sure, if you're looking at it from that perspective, but that is not overall health, right? And it's the same with improving your overall health and wellness and functioning. It's the same with functional mushrooms and supplements. It's not just providing a high extraction product. It's also about the USDA organic certified piece. It's the quality piece. It's, making sure that it is a dual extract so that it is more bioavailable, so that you can actually take the molecule that is studied in the research for the health benefits, which is why you would want to take the supplement. So it's all encompassing. Brain health is not just about stimulating nerve growth factor. It's also about mitigating inflammation. In the medical community, there's kind of this saying where they say that Alzheimer's is like type 3 diabetes. Well, there's only 2 types of diabetes for those who are listening and who don't know. There's type 1 diabetes where you are dependent on insulin, and there's type 2 diabetes where maybe potentially you might need to be on insulin, but it's more so related to your diet and, is developed in the later years, 50s and beyond. It doesn't mean that it can't happen earlier, but it's related to, insulin resistance. We've all heard that term where our cells are not responsive to blood glucose and to blood sugar and all of that because maybe we are potentially having a diet high in sugar, et cetera. But it's that inflammation piece with brain health as well, right? Where we are mitigating inflammation. It's stress. Stress is a big component as well. Have you ever thought of, maybe you're in a situation or season of your life where you are just experiencing high stress. Maybe you're somebody who's going through a divorce, or maybe work is really stressful right now. Think of any really situation where you're experiencing a lot of stress. Are you able to think of things on the spot? Maybe you're doing a presentation. Are you able to think of things really quickly in all of your notes and it's stored in your memory? No, we go into the sympathetic nervous system state where we are not able to think. Our body is perceiving stress as a threat to our survival. It's just the blueprint of us as human beings. It's a natural response. So, stress and chronic stress and managing that is a huge piece with regards to brain health. And then there's also the mood component too. So we've touched on cognitive functioning as, a ton with the research in BDNF and nerve growth factor. But mood is another area of the brain, right, that we need to support. There's a lot of research on lion's mane supporting mood regulation. Yes. But there's also another mushroom that has a ton of research for supporting mood regulation, and that is reishi. Not only just with mood regulation, but also being an quote unquote anti-inflammatory, supporting the inflammatory response. Reishi is one of the most widely researched functional mushrooms, aside from turkey tail, which we'll touch on in another episode. Just because of its use for hundreds and hundreds of years in Asia, it was coined the mushroom of immortality. So reishi, or Ganoderma lucidum extract, is a potent ancient Asian remedy for the treatment of various diseases. So there was this one study that investigated reishi extract and its preventative effects on LPS-stimulated inflammation of these BV2 microglial cells, so these cells in our brain. And so the results showed that pre-treatment with reishi extract decreased the expression of pro-inflammatory cytokines. So I can list off all of these numbers and letters, but essentially the main thing is that these specific molecules that are known in research to promote inflammation and to cause inflammation were actually decreased. And this is important too, because in Alzheimer's research and dementia research, there are a bunch of different avenues of which researchers are examining treatment levels. It's not just a one-step approach. There are, as we know, not many, but there are some pharmaceutical medications that they are targeting specific areas for treatment of Alzheimer's. But one of them is the neuroinflammation piece. And so the data showed that reishi extract inhibited the ability of pro-inflammatory mediators release and suggests that there's a potential role for reishi extract in neurodegenerative disease prevention. Reishi is used across Asia as a nutraceutical as well as herbal remedy for many different ailments, and it's been shown for therapeutic benefits as an anti-diabetic agent in cancer research and in inflammatory diseases like colitis, which is in the digestive tract. So this is extremely important because remember earlier I mentioned that they say that Alzheimer's is like type 3 diabetes. So if we can support our body's blood sugar management area and support how our body is responding to insulin and blood sugar and being sensitive to that, then essentially maybe we could prevent the development of Alzheimer's and dementia, because Brandi mentioned earlier, many people are not even thinking about this until they're in their later years, right? Maybe in their 60s is when they're like thinking that they maybe want to explore some preventative measures. And I would say that any time is a good time before it starts.
Right now would be a good time.
Right now would be a good time. But just like, for example, atherosclerosis, which we know is plaque buildup in the arteries, which is a major risk factor for heart disease. That actually starts in your 20s, which a lot of people don't think about, right? So it's just all of the factors of living a healthy lifestyle. And so this one study suggested that reishi has a neuroprotective effect and may be used as a useful therapeutic option for the prevention of Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease and, all of these neurodegenerative diseases. So it's not just lion's mane, which we know is the brain mushroom. There's definitely the most research on lion's mane in particular for brain health and mood and all of the conditions and symptoms and things that make up us and encompass brain health, but reishi as well. And not only for this inflammation piece, for the blood sugar relation piece with reishi, but there's also that stress piece. In another particular study, they found that reishi alleviated chronic stress-induced depressive symptoms, which inhibited particular inflammatory activity and enhanced certain pathways that were associated with proper mood function in the brain. And so, Brandi, on the topic of reishi, I mentioned this whole chronic stress piece. That is a huge factor in a lot of conditions. In particular, autoimmune disease, right? We think of that like stress is a huge, huge thing. And naturopathic doctors will also say that like no matter what condition you have or what symptoms you're dealing with, if you're not managing chronic stress, right, you are not helping yourself. And so you are always calling reishi herbal yoga. I know you're a big yogi and you love to use reishi to support your yoga and meditation practices. I personally love reishi, especially for sleep and for that calmness and as well with meditation. You just returned from a meditation retreat, so I think this is very fitting. Can you share how you use mushrooms to support all of that?
Yeah, and boy, did I take a lot of reishi. I'm so glad I brought the whole jar of reishi on that retreat with me because I absolutely had an advantage over the meditators around me, and I felt so good to be able to contribute to the collective consciousness in this space because that reishi was for sure adding amazing vibrational energy. And it makes me think of when you talked about the potency of products and importance that we're using an extract that's concentrated and the quality of it. It's also the way those mushrooms were grown.
Yes.
And our mushrooms are grown in the Dao philosophy of cultivation, just meaning that they are grown in the place where they would grow in nature and grown in a philosophy that is, it's called Dao. And that means that we are supporting that living herb or fungi in this case with the energy that it would have in that place, the air quality, the water that is around it, the habitat, the vibration of that place is transferred into what we're consuming in the end. And boy, do I feel that when I consume our reishi, especially versus other products that are reishi that is grown on grain in a plastic bag in a lab with artificial light and filtered air and all of those things. So having a whole fruiting body mushroom come from a cultivator that is growing it in nature is I think something that I can tell I have felt now. So for sure, spiritual practices also have powerful neurogenic effects. We know that. So if you are thinking, I'm going to take lion's mane, I'm going to take reishi, and I'm going to have neurogenesis, adding meditation on top of that is like the level up. So we meditate together here at Eversio HQ with a group of us, and I think you would see us glowing some days with the amount of mushrooms and meditation pouring out of the office. I'm sure our neighbors think we're crazy.
These are the only M&Ms that we take.
Mushrooms and meditation. We're going to put that on a shirt. But definitely, spiritual practices have neurogenic effects as well, meditation being one of them, and really just help us to produce relaxation responses in the body. It's calm. They bring us that calm. When the brain growth is going full bore, when you're in that high neurogenic rate, we're experiencing radiant brain health. And it feels great just to wake up in the morning because your brain can't wait to engage with the world creatively. I wake up in the morning, I can't wait to meditate because I want that experience. And if I've taken reishi the night before, had a great sleep, and take my lion's mane in the morning, like my meditation has just gotten better and better and better. And I'm so grateful that I had that experience to be on retreat, to really play with a protocol that I felt it being enhanced. So
I think there's one thing that I want to jump in here and say is that to be creative and to access this higher level of thinking or even just engaging in meditation is that stress piece. So Brandi mentioned taking it in the evening, and then the next morning when she wakes up, she feels ready to go into meditation, is able to drop in much quicker. It's because her body physiologically is in a parasympathetic state. Her body is not stressed. Her body is relaxed. When our body is relaxed, then that leaves more energy and room, so to speak, for other things to happen.
Absolutely. So many people will say to me, I'm a super nerd and I'm not shy about the fact that I love to meditate. And I have so many people say, I can't do that. I can't meditate. I've tried. I can't do it. And the reason that they can't do it is because they're not able to drop into parasympathetic. So everybody can meditate. It's available to all of us. That connection to that invisible field of infinite information is available to all of us all of the time, but it's not available to you if you're in fight or flight. So finding ways to get yourself out of that. And I mean, that can just be with your breath. That can be through connection, but I'm going to tell you that functional mushrooms are there to help us with that. So in all spiritual traditions, the essence of who we are is considered our soul or our spirit. This is the essence that is peace or love. It's the core of our consciousness. And I think there's not a culture out there that doesn't consider the soul to be eternal. So when I take Reishi, I feel like I'm feeding my eternal soul. Like I am just giving a gift to future me right now, but also feeding this soul that is going to be around for a long, long, long time. A spiritual practice like meditation to me is a way to begin to connect to that, connecting to not just me right now, but me tomorrow and me a long time ahead from now. So it is just allowing us to have our outer being when we come up and show up in the world, because we can't meditate all day, show up as that person we want to be because we've taken care of our nervous system. We've given ourselves something to help us show up in love. And I just see anxiety, depression, cognitive decline getting better. We see people getting better just by simple things like changing their diet, avoiding those neurotoxins in their diet, adding an adaptogen like lion's mane and reishi to help us move into parasympathetic, and just getting into that resilient mind, so that you can shift your thoughts, so that you can shift out of that monkey mind and get into that meditation. So that retreat that I went to was 40 hours of meditation over the course of the week, 25 hours of neuroscience, life-changing experience. Dr. Joe Dispenza is a researcher of neuroscience and quantum physics. So we got super nerdy. We talked a lot about quantum physics and the quantum field and the quantum model of reality being that you are causing the effect instead of waiting for cause and effect, that being the cause of that effect that we want. So when you feel whole, you begin to heal. And when you're in love with life and you're in love with yourself, your equal will find you. That future that you want is out there waiting for you. Using mushrooms to help you find future you that is the you want, the you that you manifest or imagine or whatever it is in your practice, is so beautifully enhanced by that. So feeling thanks before the event happens, opening your heart through including things like reishi and traditional Chinese medicine is that heart-opening mushroom of spiritual potency, is how we can get the life that we want in the future. We can have it right now. You can change your brain just by thinking. This can be done, but you need a lot of neurons to do that. You need the thinking brain to be healthy, and we need the heart to be open. Reishi and lion's mane are that brain-heart connection that just offers that coherence to me. So Des, lion's mane and reishi, superheroes for brain health research over the last few decades. I want to know, what do you predict the future will hold for further research around mushrooms and brain health? So beyond the reishi and lion's mane, what else is out there? If those two can be that amazing, there has to be more.
Yeah. I think there will be more research on, two other in particular, one being cordyceps and the other being tremolo. The reason I say cordyceps is because cordyceps already has research to support it mitigating inflammation. So we hear a lot of people in our community who will take cordyceps, and they find that they have less pain. And if they have more inflammatory conditions, that they are experiencing less inflammation. And oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes pain and inflammation are linked and are very closely connected. So I think that the research on cordycepin, which is present in our cordyceps extract, and we think of cordycepin for energy, I think there will be more research on how it affects our neuroinflammation. And then as well as that, I think there will be more research on tremolo. So we know there is some emerging research already on tremolo, and same with cordyceps. Like they're examining cordyceps as one of the functional mushrooms that will be potentially supportive for Alzheimer's and dementia and all of these things because of the neuroinflammation piece, specifically targeting areas of research for therapeutic treatment, such as the tau proteins. But another functional mushroom is tremolo. There's already research on tremolo supporting neurite growth, so those brain cell growth. I recently came across some research on tremolo, and I found it to be very, very interesting. So in one study, there were individuals who were taking tremolo extracts, and they were found to show a significant improvement in learning and memory. So very similar to some of the lion's mane research. And this was in comparison to the control group. So this was the part that was really cool. So the tremolo extract alleviated the loss of a particular gene in the hippocampus area of the brain, of which that said gene, the CHAT, is an important indicator for the functional state of certain neurons in the central and peripheral nervous systems. Higher levels of this particular gene in the hippocampal region of the brain have been associated with better performance on certain learning and memory tasks. We know that the hippocampus is involved in learning and memory, so this makes sense. Upregulation of that particular gene, better memory and learning. So this other part, which was very fascinating to me, was that tremolo also increased the uptake of glucose in the brain by 7 times. So we know that glucose is the brain's primary source of energy. If the energy is not being fed to the brain is not going to function properly. So the fact that increased uptake in glucose to the brain was improved, I think that is going to be another area of research that is just going to take off, because circulation to the brain is extremely important. Nutrients and energy to the brain is super important. Mitigating the neuroinflammation in the brain. So neuro meaning brain, inflammation in the brain. That's extremely important. So we know all of the research on tremolo mostly is about skin health. Skin health, in terms of hydration and things like that, but something for beauty and brains is kind of cool, right? With tremolo. So
Does it get better than that?
I don't know.
That's the fountain of youth to me. Thank you, Mother Nature.
Yeah. So I think that there's already a ton of research on lion's mane. There's a bunch on reishi as well for brain health. There's some on tremolo, some on cordyceps. I think there will be more on those functional mushrooms in the future, in addition to lion's mane too. Like in Asia, they are using functional mushrooms as pharmaceutical medications, and it is quite common to use it to supplement other pharmaceutical medications. So for you, Brandi, in particular, aside from those, are there any functional mushrooms or any mushrooms or anything that's shown up in your research on brain health?
Well, yeah, lion's mane was for sure the first, and there's the most. And then when you start realizing that we need not just the, structural synthesis and support of nerve growth factor, but we also need that heart coherence and that calm piece, you find reishi. But for me, I just started looking back further and further to the root cause of my brain health issues. And I had an autoimmune disease. It was psoriasis. It turned into psoriatic arthritis. And what was going on to then lead me to take the pharmaceutical that might be what led to my brain health issues. And I come across chaga, because chaga mushroom is the only human clinical trial that's any good that we can find on chaga was on psoriasis. People with psoriasis, and had incredible effects on that. So of course it became interest. I thought, I want that. So chaga was a product we developed later on. We can go into that in other episodes, but essentially chaga is amazing for gut health, which then of course turns up in skin health, and of course turns up in brain health as well. So we do see some research on chaga affecting the brain, but it's because of how it is affecting our gut. It's a massive anti-inflammatory, helping people with arthritis, and we know it has more antioxidants than any other food on the planet. And that antioxidant piece with brain health also massively important. So yes, chaga is something that I think is one of those indirectly supporting the brain mushrooms that I always add to my stack somewhere in the day. And I like to have that. We have a blend that is a 6 mushroom blend, and it has chaga in it. And I'm definitely making sure that it's got the tremolo in there, and it's something that I can put into my shake, or I put it into a cocoa or a tea to make sure that I'm just upping my game through the day with that one.
And I think, so something I want to mention about the 6 mushroom blend, you know, I like to, as Brandi mentioned, we're smoothie crazy. It's a great way for us to get some protein in the morning.
The vessel.
It's the vessel. It tastes great. Easy for functional mushrooms. I like to combine a bunch of different blends. I mean, the 3 mushroom blend we think of in the morning. I like that 6 mushroom blend with all of those functional mushrooms for that antioxidant factor, because I find that not only am I more sharp with having more energy from the cordyceps and the lion's mane in the 3 mushroom blend, but having that anti-inflammatory, so to speak, piece coming in as well is extremely important. And also something that we haven't touched on is ergothioneine.
Yes.
So ergothioneine has been coined the longevity vitamin in research. And I think we need a whole episode on ergothioneine because it's so exciting. It's kind of a newer area of research. Ergothioneine in the research is involved in many metabolic pathways. Yeah. So we think of like blood sugar, we think of lipid metabolism, all of those things, energy, etc. It is involved. But with ergothioneine, we cannot produce it ourselves. We need to consume it from sources. Mushrooms and certain functional mushrooms.
Oyster mushroom being the highest.
Oyster mushroom being the highest. Lion's mane also contains ergothioneine. And so, as I mentioned, we cannot make it ourselves. We need to consume it. So research examining ergothioneine has found that in mild cognitive impairment or cognitive impairment in general, those levels of ergothioneine actually naturally decline. And so they found that in particular tissues with a high amount of energy consumption, like we think of the brain, for example, have a high use of ergothioneine essentially. So ergothioneine is present in these tissues that have a lot of energy usage. We think of the brain. The brain is exposed or quote unquote vulnerable to oxidants, right? Yes. That's why our brain needs antioxidants. So this ergothioneine piece is another area of research that I think will continue to develop and to just go beyond what we know now. But
yes, when you go on PubMed today and you look at the history of research on ergothioneine, it's like dead flat until about 2011. And we just see this massive spike of everybody wanting to know about it. And I think it's come along with this shroom boom that we're in. When you research mushrooms and their beneficial compounds, you cannot miss the fact that this is our best source of ergothioneine, and ergothioneine being such an interesting factor when we look at all of these, and we see it show up in people with cardiovascular disease, people with any kind of neurodegenerative disease. They have low levels of ergothioneine. Yeah. If we can increase the ergothioneine, can we solve some of these problems? Mm-hmm. And people just eat mushrooms. I mean, we can measure the ergothioneine in our mushrooms, and we do that, and we put it on our COAs, so you know that it's there. But just eating mushrooms, the ergothioneine can be available to us as well. You do have to eat a considerable amount of them, but if I was told you got to eat a couple of cups of mushrooms in a day and you can prevent Alzheimer's, I'm going to do that. Mm-hmm. Learn to cook the mushrooms really well, and yes, that's amazing. I love the talk about ergothioneine as well. The other mushroom that I will mention that is not something that we can provide out of Eversio Wellness, because it would be illegal to do so, of course, are the psilocybin-producing mushrooms, and I think that's what I see. So I just envision this future where naturopathic doctors like Desiree will be able to meet a new client and have one of the assessment tools or intake processes be, here's your ACE questionnaire, your Adverse Childhood Events questionnaire. Fill that out, and if your score is really 1 or higher, you have some trauma in your past, starting with that before we get into, for sure, offering pharmaceuticals or making big diet changes or lifestyle changes, because we know that we are a society that has not done a good job of dealing with our emotional health. We have just been prescribing pharmaceuticals to mask the surface symptoms of our mental health concerns, and we are not addressing them. And psilocybin mushrooms are, to me, going to be this. I mean, they're called breakthrough medicine already, right? We know that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has described psilocybin as breakthrough medicine, and that's just super duper exciting. So will you be able to prescribe it one day? I hope so. I really hope so. I think it's a tool that we know when we consume psilocybin from a psilocybin-producing mushroom, it helps us to shut down the default mode network in our brain. Some people will call that the ego. This is the part of the brain that's running the show all of the time, helping you live in the loop. And for some people, that loop is not a very good place to be. And when we can shut down the default mode network, it allows these other beautiful parts of our brain that never get a chance to speak to each other to have connection. And when we have that, we can see things in a new way. We can go back and not relive our trauma, but see our trauma as something other than the thing that is making us miserable in our present state. So I think there's huge, huge hope for psilocybin being the tool in the toolkit of all, for sure, psychotherapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, and I hope naturopathic doctors as well, to help people get through those emotional health issues so that we can start to heal the physical body after that and become a society of people who are more well than we are today. So yeah, chaga and all the psilocybin-producing mushrooms. So Desiree, as a naturopathic doctor, I know you do have high hopes for the future of natural medicines like psilocybin in our country's healthcare. How do you see it being valuable to us as you go forward in your career?
I think it can potentially be helpful to treat the root cause. So we talked today about how brain health and optimal brain health is not just about supporting the brain, but it's really holistic health, right? It's treating many different areas of your health, like stress, as one example, or gut health as another example, to help with your overall symptoms. So I think that, addressing trauma, addressing you being in touch and in tune and able to process emotion, I think is another big thing. And it can be a tool in the toolbox for helping treat and address the root cause, because the only way through something is through it. And so it can be a catalyst for that change and be a tool. It's not for everyone. At this time, it's currently an illegal substance, but I hope that someday soon in the future, it will be a tool in the toolbox to help people move forward, because
we need it.
We need it.
We need a game changer.
And I think that everybody deserves to have the health and joy and happiness that they want in their life. And I think
we have.
Yeah. And I think
so grateful.
And I think that it can be a way to help people not only move through all of those traumas and emotions and all of those things, but also to connect with others,
Absolutely.
To feel love and
Mushrooms
connection
are
and community.
Symbols of interconnectedness. We say this all of the time. Our mission being to change lives through fungi. We mean all the fungi. So I love that we ended on that. We could talk about that forever. Should we do an episode just on psilocybin-producing mushrooms?
Yeah, I think we should. And I think also we have a sister company that
We
I
do.
think you should mention very briefly
Yes.
for our listeners,
Yes.
that, we're doing things the right way.
Yes.
With Health Canada.
Yeah, it's sad that we live in a country where there is no legal way to obtain psilocybin-producing mushrooms outside of what is called the Special Access Program. You essentially need to be suicidal or diagnosed with treatment-resistant depression and applied to the government to have the right to receive psilocybin, and most of that psilocybin being supplied when you have asked your doctor to fill out this extensive paperwork in order to be considered, you're going to get synthetic psilocybin. And in my opinion, that's not the same. That's not grown DDAO. So we do have Eversio Labs as a sister company to Eversio Wellness that has a research and development license through Health Canada. It's a controlled substance dealer's license for research and development. So we are not selling it, but we love that we are part of the change that we hope is to come, and to do it the right way, to offer Canadians the choice of natural psilocybin that comes from a whole fruiting body mushroom, or the synthetic that is available today and is what is actually used in much of the research. But we need more research on naturally occurring psilocybin, the stuff that you would receive if you were picking that mushroom out of a farmer's field somewhere. So I think we should end on that note. And at the end of our episodes, we're always going to share a review. Do you have one ready? Your favorite review of the week? Product review.
This is my favorite review of the week. Thank you to Brianne B for submitting this. So she says, I've been ordering this for my mother-in-law who has Parkinson's, and she feels it's been helping with her Parkinson's symptoms and cognitive function. Such a great quality product. And I think this is really important to me to hear this, because one of the kindest things that you can do is, if you found benefit in your, for something yourself, gifting it to another person.
I assume she's talking about lion's mane.
Yeah.
I mean, buying lion's mane for our parents, I mean, what a gift. A gift to you, because you're going to be taking care of them as they grow older. But really such a great gift to everyone, the gift of mushroom wellness. I love it. The review I'm going to share is from Gatina, and it's a review on our Reishi product called Chill Now. It's a 15-to-1 dual extract of Reishi in capsules, and she called her review Life Hack. And she says, I couldn't love a product more. My energy, mental clarity, health, and skin have never been better. As someone who struggles with gut anxiety, which causes sudden nausea, I can say that it has been at bay. In the past, when stress would rise, my nausea would increase, but now Reishi has changed my life. I'm forever grateful for Eversio in my life. So we're so grateful that you gave Reishi a chance to be the thing that would be the change that you needed. So thank you so much, Katina, for sharing that. And with that, we will say farewell, goodbye, and we will see you next time on the next episode of the Eversio Experience. Have a great day, everyone. We hope you learned something new here today. If anyone you know could benefit from what we shared in this episode, please share it with them. And if you're interested in adding mushroom wellness to your life, you can use code PODCAST15 to save 15% on your entire order at EversioWellness.com.
If you haven't yet left us a rating and review, subscribed to this podcast, or followed our social media accounts listed in the show notes, we would so appreciate that. Thank you so much for sharing this moment with us. Until next time, be well.